and welcome to another exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and joining me tonight is a guest who, honestly, if you've been a fan of this show or in the disclosure movement, you recognize him. But I'm going to allow him to introduce himself anyway. He is my third guest of this season, and I was so grateful that he was my third guest of my first season and took a chance and trusted me, and now he's back for another episode. So I'm truly grateful and appreciative. And without further ado, I'm going to allow Tony Rodrigues to share a little bit of where he's at right now. So take it away, Tony.
Michael, thanks for having me back, man. I'm always happy to share what I can with people that ask, right? So I don't ever want to force what I've been through or my testimony or any of the info in my books upon people that aren't curious, right? So anytime somebody asks me to come on and talk, I'm very deeply honored and I'm open to sharing it all. It's hard to, it's a hard pill to swallow to really think about some of the stuff that I've done and witnessed in my books. And so, like I said, it's just information that's not for everybody. Although times are slowly changing, we are moving into a world that I'll tell you what, it's moving faster than now than ever.
It is, and I have to say, you have a fan in the chat room already. Brett Berg is saying hello. We were chatting just before we started the show, and he said he's read all three of your books.
That's amazing. That's great. That's great. I love the support. And the first book, we put a lot of work in. It took a very long time. The third book, the last one I did, although it has a few grammatical errors and layout errors in the book, has a lot of great research and I put a lot of work into that information in Beyond Sight. That's about remote viewing and about the program I was in and where it came about and some of the receipts and the paperwork around it and psychoenergetics as a whole, which I think a lot of people are unaware how far along and progressed they were. So I'm very proud of that book. So thanks, Brent, for popping in. And I saw Brent earlier today in another interview on a testimony for the flyovers at the GSIC, Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection in Denver. We had a UFO flyover. A lot of people were witnesses, and Brett came in and gave his testimony as well. It was really awesome.
Very cool. And he was sharing with me that he saw you and Danny earlier. And so I was like, that's really cool. And when I clicked on his page, I saw the GSIC, and I was like, I was at the first one in Florida, watched the other two on live stream. And I have to say, with your presentations, I find it really interesting how much information you can put in, but you put it in a way that doesn't overwhelm the person. And I'm also a little bit surprised with the emotion that's behind it, that you're like able to get through and keep going and keep everyone's interest.
Thank you. When you're the one presenting, you don't know how it's going to go over, right, with the audience. I'm putting it out there. I don't really know what I look like or what my presentation looks like to somebody, especially that's never heard it before. But I think that a lot of testimonies that have come forward in the recent years, a lot of testimonies really don't have put an emphasis on proving their account. People are just coming out and kind of there's a one-upsmanship, like I saw this and we did this, and people have gotten away from digging up proof before they go on a show, and you really have to have some of your testimony substantiated in some way. Back when we first started talking about disclosure in 2015, 2016, no one would touch you if you didn't have some sort of evidence that you brought forward. And we've really moved away from that recently, and I think it's a dangerous precedent. And I think a lot of people, and I don't think people are being deceptive. I just think that there's no emphasis on digging in evidence. And some people have evidence of remote viewing or clairvoyant sessions. They pay a psychic or hypno session, and a lot of that stuff is supportive evidence, not definitive evidence. And I would just love to see more people just put a lot of work into it and say, look, this is what happens. Here's how it happens, and go through that aspect that you just gave me credit for making it more understandable. Because when you talk about anything time travel, you lose the audience quickly. Most people that are not really studied it, that aren't into the information, heart and soul, you lose them very fast. When you talk about, everybody wants to believe aliens already. Everybody kind of in their heart already knows. And but when we talk about the phenomenon of being abducted and kept for a long time and then put back immediately minutes after you left, with time travel and that, you really lose people a lot. And I want people to put more emphasis on that if I could. I've moved on. Of my book Beyond Sight, I went to Inyokern. I went to one of the places in my abduction in my 20 and back, and dug up evidence and created that book. And what really happened because of that trip, more it's good to see Penny here. More memories came. And when I really started researching what I had remembered, going somewhere, remembering somewhere is one thing, but then going back there and smelling it and the same humidity and the sun and the airplanes and everything started to really stoke up a lot of memories. And I wrote the book about it. And as I was researching for Beyond Sight, more came, and it really turned into a career, sort of, because now I'm teaching remote viewing full time, and we are branching off into other things with the remote viewing. I did a conference last year that was based on remote viewing information, and I think that there's a long way to go. We're still discovering ways to improve remote viewing, like seriously, and it's been something that's been well established. There are many excellent remote viewers guilds out there, groups and classes you can take. I hear about new ones all the time that have been established for many years, and there's many ways to remote view, but we're still finding techniques that help a lot with the group that I have and with some of the info we have. And so that's where I've gone. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions around remote viewing versus clairvoyance or channeling or just plain psychic ability. Remote viewing is something different, albeit it's the same science and the same technique to warm up and get into it. The first step of all these things is meditation. And remote viewing is just like a good exercise with that, with its own protocol. So I'm not sure if I'm talking in circles yet. Michael, bail me out.
Well, I love how you were commenting that remote viewing is similar, but it's not to all these other gifts that people claim that they have. And I want to backtrack real quick to something that you had pointed out, and that is, finding evidence. And I'm curious, as a possible experiencer myself, how do you go about finding evidence? Because it's not like you can call a number and say, hey, can you show me my file? Can you help me out here? They're going to deny.
Some people claim that's possible. And there are organizations there are people that seem to have great information. It's very difficult. A lot of people, so much has been covered, it's hard to bring new information to the community. So it's hard to say, I remember being abducted, and I remember going through this, and this is what I saw, and nobody else saw it, and you can prove it. So many people have come forward with excellent evidence in the last 7 years, 8 years, that it's hard to bring something new. A lot of the disclosure has already happened. So when you talk about the books and the interviews that a lot of people that have been through the phenomenon have already disclosed, It's hard to bring something new, and something new is, the best form of evidence, something new that can be sorted out. However, there is overlap. There are ways that testimonies can get out and be validated. So there are many things that, how do I say this? If you were in Vietnam, Michael, and so we're the diaper brigade of Vietnam. I was born when it was ended. You were in Vietnam and I was in Vietnam, and decades later we ran into each other. It's almost unspoken. There are a few things that the details can be faked. You could read books about Vietnam and lie, but not the emotional connection to what happened. So if you came across somebody that knew all the details of being in the war as a soldier and tried to fake their way into it and got into a discussion with somebody that spent a lot of time there, when they got into really deeper aspects of it, it would validate them or disprove them. So if you were somebody that, people that were in a war together see it, even in the military, see it in each other. Be like, I get a feeling you were in the military. Were you in the military? And so it comes out because it leaves a impression on your personality. The space program's no different. There are things that are just not fakeable, and things that are, once you've been through it, you understand, you kind of see it in their eyes, kind of thing. And I'm not saying that that's evidence, or you say, but between the experiencers, it is. For one. For two, there is evidence. I mean, there are things you can look at. Most people have family members or something weird happened in their life, and then you can go back and look at the timeline of your life, when you were taken, what happened in your life, look at when you were put back and what happened in your life, and strange things in between. And there's usually a lot of overlapping factors that you can point out and present, as well as people can bring back technologies. So you were around technologies all the time. We have a lot of people that were experiencers that are developing technology around what they trying to keep up with Penny, technology with what they witnessed, what they lived with. So there's a lot of different ways still that are available to validate an experience up there.
And I appreciate that, and that's a good way to look at it, because I always look at it as the fact it's a secret program, so you can't look it up in a book, and so it's like, well, how does one prove the quote unprovable that we think it is? And so I appreciate you sharing that. And going into the remote viewing aspect, like you were mentioning and everything, when someone comes up to you, and says, I have these gifts, is that remote viewing? How do you define remote viewing and distinguish the two, or
So I
meaning
don't want to.
gifts from remote viewing?
I don't want to ever sound like I'm bagging on people for saying that they're not remote viewing when they're doing something else. I really don't ever want to do that. I don't ever want to bag around people that have come forward and shared their testimonies that don't have empirical evidence. That doesn't mean something didn't happen. And people that are psychic and have clairvoyant abilities, if they're not doing a remote viewing protocol, that doesn't mean that they're not seeing accurate information. So I want to be clear about that. Remote viewing has a protocol based on blind targeting. So the person that's doing the viewing has no idea what the target is that they're viewing, and that enables the proof to happen immediately. So it enables immediate validation of the target. You need somebody else. You cannot really remote. You can, but it's a difficult proposition to remote view by yourself. So if you're concentrating on a target that you already know what it is, there's front loading, and the data can be skewed. Somebody that's very psychic or very practiced at it. So the thing is, it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get. And somebody that's been doing it, naturally clairvoyant and has practiced it along most of their life can project and remote view, albeit that's not what we're talking about when we talk about it. Someone can be clairvoyant and get great information about a target, but that's not remote viewing. So that's a clairvoyance. It's a psychic probe into it, and inherently has a lot of front-loaded data. So there's a couple hazards. One is that there's front-loaded data. You expect to find something, and so that trickles into the data somehow. Then you can't just reveal the target and prove that you were right. So it takes some investigation, and most people don't do that, especially when you're looking at a alien or space program target. There's really no way to go there and validate it immediately. The advantage of remote viewing with the protocols is that somebody else makes the target, and it's anonymous. You don't know who they are. That's a blind target. Then they hand it off to somebody else. It's a double blind target. So you have no idea what the target is, and then you sit down. So Michael, you say the target is, what's underneath the pyramid? What's inside Area 51, right? Boom, it's on the target. You put it in an envelope, and you put out a number on the envelope, or a words, or whatever it is, random symbols, a coordinate, and then you give it to somebody else, and then they give it to me, and I do the viewing, and I follow the protocol. And there's a protocol of steps A, B, C, D to go, and I whittle out the information, and then we do it to 10 remote viewers. And so out of the blue, it could be any target. All I have is a random set of coordinates, a number, and out of the blue, I put a disc shape, and then I say I see a Coke machine and looks like a UFO, like a big disc. I don't know, and it's like a barn. And it's hot and dry, and I describe all these things, and I go, it's really super rainy, which might not be true, maybe overlay. I see foliage, but then somebody else remote views it, and they go, it's snowing, but I see a disc and a Coke machine. And then somebody else says, I see it, it's dry and sunny, and it's out on a boat, but I see a disc and a Coke machine. So you understand, we're getting the wrong information on some facets of the target, but we're getting overlapping information when a disc and a Coke machine keep coming through many viewers. And then then at the end we just go, okay, we're done. That's all we got. What's the target? And you open the envelope and you go, what's inside Area 51? And every single viewing has a disc with other things that may or may not be there, but you have the overlapping. So that's really hard to argue at that point, that these people randomly all guessed the exact same thing. And the thing is, the more you do it, when you get people that are doing 40, 50, 100, 200, thousands of targets, they become very proficient at it. They become very, very proficient. And you start getting really confirmable information, so that you do so many targets that are confirmable. You do, what's the lamp in my office look like? And they draw a picture of my lamp, which is kind of weird looking. So over and over again, and then I go, what's the Eiffel Tower? What's the Statue of Liberty? What's the Four Corners Monument? And they always come back with a correct interpretation of the data, or overlap that is correct of each target, which has nothing to do with the other target. And then you ask them, tell me about the base on the backside of the moon. You have to then trust, when there's overlapping data, that it's correct. And so that's kind of how it works. And there's a big misnomer. There's a lot of people that are being lied to, being told that they're being remote viewed, when it's a different psychic phenomenon totally. And so, I don't know. I hope that answers your question. I hope that worked.
It did really well, and it kind of triggered a memory of mine and I'm curious, if it's like a predecessor to this. Is my parents and I grew up in metaphysics, and so we would have a group of people over, and either my mom or my dad would cut pictures out of magazines, stick them in a manila envelope, and I would never know what's in it, and nobody that came would. And we would pass it around, and we would say, "Here, what do you see inside this envelope?" And try to see if we could see, pick up what's in there. And so, I'm wondering, were we kind of
That's
teetering on?
exactly one of the protocols. I'm wondering where you guys got that from. I would be curious to ask them where they got the idea to play that.
Yeah, I will. And we actually have a couple questions for you in the chat room. I'll take a moment and we can cover. Brett is asking, we hear the term 20 and backers, but Tony, you are a 30 and backers, so there must be 40 or 50, etc. So how do you determine the time frame?
Well, the 20-year time frame was the technology that I went with, and originally they had sold off a leased off version in space to ETs that had a technology to make it possible to do another 10 years, like an extension, which is a crazy looking timeline. And it's very hard to explain to people. But that doesn't mean there's 40 and 50 backers. It also doesn't mean that there's not. So the technology that I was taking was capped to 20 years. And they said that if I was longer than 20 years, there was a high probability of having some sort of mental problem. So they capped it at 20 years as a safety factor. I think there's more, the same way that we have a nuclear bomb and then we have a hydrogen bomb. I think it's the same thing where they have different forms of technology that do the same result, which is life extension. The other thing is that some of it is genetically dependent. So there are genetic markers. Not everybody can go. Not everybody can do it. Only a certain population of people that have the genetics to go can. And some people have the genetics to go multiple times and through different forms of the technology. So what they are, I don't know. To be honest, this is something it's not my forte. I know that the program that I was in was capped at 20 years. And I know that the subject matter of my second book, Project Star Maker, is based upon the very hardest parts for me to remember was the Ceres colony selling me off to an ET species that put me in a watered down adolescent body so that they could stretch 10 more years. So a very telescopic existence that I went. So 30 and backer, I don't claim it much because I just for the simple, Brett, I'm gonna say this to you directly. I don't go around saying it often just because I don't want to confuse the audience more than they already are. So because whenever I do a show and they talk about the time travel, I always get people that go, "Well, where were your parents when you were abducted for 20 years? How come your parents didn't call the cops?" And people don't understand that I was taken on a Thursday night, and I woke up Friday morning. I was gone for a short time, and I was gone for 20 years, 30 years when you add the other 10 on that happened. And the other thing is that those memories are very vague. So it's not a rock I'm going to die on. When I talk about Project Star Maker and that stuff, I remember those memories. And when we really analyzed them, they fleshed out. But it's also not something I'm willing to argue with. There's really just no evidence around it. So that's why it was in the second book. The first book has a pile of evidence that supports everything I remember in the first book. So it's something that I could stand with a skeptic and not look like a total jackass. So that's why they're split into two books. And so, Brett, like you're saying, there could be 40 or 50 backers. It could be more. That could be a form of torture, to be honest with you. There's just a lot to it. And let's face it, the human technology doesn't take into account consciousness and how it relates to our surroundings at all. Human science doesn't give consciousness the time of day, and it should.
Right, and I wonder too when we talk about like 40 or 50 and back, could it have been a 20 and back and then they just reinserted you right away and so it's like 40 but it's
So
too different.
people in the programs, a lot of people that I've worked with, the experience looks like, and I know we got Penny in the audience, and she's could still be out there for all we know. She's an anomaly as far as a lot of her depth of this, and I don't have anything against it. So 55 to 60 at a time. So Penny is somebody that had very genetics that supported that, and she probably was the subject of radical technologies and the cloning. We talked about it before, but people that I've worked with, and there's a genetic limit. They seem to be more Caucasian people. They seem to be more like, you know, I don't want to say German, but Finland, German, Scotland, a lot of Scottish people. It looks like this. They're taken and they do 20 years and they get put back to the same time they left. Then they're back in their regular life for 20 years. And when they are longer, so if they're taken at 10 years old in 1980, they live for 20 years to the year 2000, and then they get put back to 1980 in the same body they were taken from and live there 20 years. And then in the year 2000 or 2001, they're taken again for another 20 years from 2001 to 2021, and then put back to 2001 and live that out. So they do 2 consecutive 20 and backs. That seems to be a popular thing for people that I have worked with when we really flesh out what was going on in their life and look at a full timeline. It seems to be that is a version of the technology that is prevalent, and it's dependent on their genetics. And the other point of reference point of data I have of that is the William Tompkins book, Selected by Extraterrestrials, where he explained the research and development with the help of Nordic ETs for the NASA, for the Apollo program, that they were trading that technology with them.
All right, and I'm getting caught up with the chat room because I got a little sidetracked with listening to your explanations. And I do have to say, one of the things I appreciate about you and a lot of my guests is when you're asked something and it's in your repertoire and everyone expects you to have the answer and you don't, you sit there and say, I really don't know. And you're honest and authentic and you don't make up, because nobody would know if you did, to be honest. Because
Well, I'll tell you what, though. Here's why. I'm not a clever liar, for one. For two, I have respect for the testimony. And for me to go out and lie on purpose and get caught in a lie would throw out all of the work I've done, the hard work I've done with my testimony, to say that this is real, and it's just not worth it. It really is. For me to make up an answer and then get called on it later is totally not worth it. I worked too hard. I went through too much to get here at this point. So I really can't afford to lie.
no, and I have to say, for my personal experience, you've kind of not only inspired me to dig deep and to see if, this is something that I'm a part of, but also the courage to say, you know what, this I remember, this I've been told. I'm not claiming what I've been told. I'm claiming only what I remember. So, and a lot of people are like, well, but we need you to have memories. I'm like, I'm sorry, they're not there. And I don't make up or I don't try to force. And I'm like, because I look at you and I go, I view you as one of the first founding of, coming forward with these programs. And I'm like, if you have the courage to stand up and say, this is my experience, I know you've heard this, I don't know anything about that, then I have the courage to come forward and say, this is what I have experienced, I have memory of, and I don't need to make up anything.
So there's a lot of different levels of people that have experienced it and been taken. There are people that only remember the contact moment, people that only remember an ET taking them and then waking up in a laboratory, and that's it. They don't remember 20 years. They don't remember anything. And then they see my testimony or others like me, and they go, man, that feels like what happened. And it's more of a hunch than anything. There are people that remember nothing, but still have a hunch that they've been involved. And they have witnesses or some kind of event that they remember of an abduction. And there are people that have a great deal of memory or fragmented memories. And it all makes sense that not everybody, you're talking about industrial grade memory deletion that they've given people that put them back. So there's also a very dangerous precedent of people that are getting hypnosis and they're being told that they were in a program, or they're paying somebody that is a remote viewing, and they get a report back that you were in this program and you were in the program, all these made up programs that I've never heard before. And they're getting told, because what they're doing is clouding up the water for real testimonies. It's not about selling you the lie. It's about tainting the truth. And so there is a very real effort of people that are being told falsely that they were members of the programs. And then they go around and parrot what they said and say, oh, that's that. And I always ask them, like, well, what do you remember then? Give me something. And if they don't have it, then I say, well, that's great, but you really shouldn't be writing a book on it yet. You need some sort of proof, a level of proof. And so there is a very real effort of people being falsely programmed to believe that they were in these programs. And it's something to be mindful of. So I don't know if that's for you exactly, what led you into you, but usually there's at least the intake event doesn't get erased. The first few minutes of contact is shocking and traumatic, and most people don't forget that.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say that kind of resonated when you were telling your story for me, that it kind of made sense, was like being a small child, and before we had moved to the state we're in now, we were playing a trivia game, and I think it was even biblical trivia. And my mom goes and says, how many hairs are on their human head? Was the question. And I just threw a number out. And they dropped the card, and it was like silent for like 2 minutes. And I was like, what? I had hit it exact. And I'm like, what elementary kid knows how many hairs are on a human head? I was like, and so I started noticing scenarios where I had knowledge that I couldn't explain why I had. And when I heard your story of, going and living this life and sometimes having bleed through of memories of something, I started, to wonder. I was like, all those little nuances that I knew that I shouldn't have known, was that information I gained from another timeline that I was able to, yeah.
It could be.
So that's what got me started. And then the fact that your experience was, I believe, was it 6?
10. I was 10.
10, and mine was 2. But I was like, still, young age. I had a unique experience, and I'm still uncovering more about that. And so I know I've said it before, but I do want to take a moment and thank you for coming forward and standing the ground and being the beacon of light and truth, and standing up for that and not allowing people to suppress it, so to speak, anymore.
Thank you, Michael. I didn't have it in mind. I didn't know. The truth is, when I first started telling what happened, when I got my memories back, I just thought I was doing the right thing. I had no idea what was going to happen because of it. And there have been really good things that have happened and really bad things. And so, I just didn't want to take it to the grave. And I felt like it's something important that people should know exists. So the reason they get away with treating people badly up there is because they think everybody's going to forget what happened to them. And so I'm an anomaly, or somebody that does remember, and my testimony is there. They can't say that anymore. So for one, and for two, I just didn't want to take it to the grave, man. I didn't know. I wasn't setting out to do. I sure didn't think I was still going to be talking about it in 2025. I'm coming up on, it's been 10 years. In May, it'll be 10 years since I got my memory back. So I didn't think it was still going to be going this far where it is.
Well, happy 10th anniversary.
Dude,
Whoever would have thought that would be something to celebrate? But we have a question, an interesting one from Gaia Love One. He or she says, "I understand you've had many 20 and back. How far into our future have you gone into that you remember?"
So I haven't. So I was gone. So it gets a little confusing, but I was taken in 1982 and I went to the year 2000. And then they put me back in 1982. So 18 years. But I worked for 12 years on ships that were traveling time, skipping little time skips in the day. We'd leave at 8 o'clock in the morning. We'd go for 8 hours and we'd come back at 8 o'clock in the morning. And when I did the math on all that, it did work out to about 2 years. So it was 20 years for me, but 18 years as the crow flies, so to speak, from 82 to 2000. So there was a time in the 90s when I knew about the Stephen King movie, Dreamcatcher, because guys in the cargo bay had bootlegged it and told me about the toilet scene where the monster came up to bite him. And we were always afraid of it. I didn't know why. And I knew about it before it happened. And when the movie came out, I went, oh my God, this is what I had remembered the guys telling me, but I didn't have a context of when it happened. When did that happen? I didn't know. I thought it was a dream or something. But no, I haven't been into the future, and I haven't been on many a 20 and back. I was taken, and my other self existed from 1982 to 2000 ish.
All right. And Iron Bear, I'm not sure if he's got a question here or if he's just making a statement, but it says, "Would that be the program's version of stop loss time?" I think that's the military term.
I'm not sure what you mean by that, Iron Bear. I mean, I'm not sure if that's a yes or no.
I'm wondering if he's talking like we're talking about being able to go 20 years and then back in this one evening or 5 minutes, as some say, if that's a stop loss time. But I don't know anything about the military having that, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't either. That a lot of there's asking about the 30 and back stop loss. I'm not sure what you mean by stop loss. I agree with Jason Rice that it was called the career return program, and 20 and back is kind of the urban legend name of it, which we've all agreed to call it now. And the secret space program is the same. The terms really don't matter when you think about what's happening. So it's a straw man argument when people get caught up over the verbiage of what things are called up there versus the actual point is that they were taking people against their will and working them for 20 years against their will and putting them back under the justification that they wouldn't remember it. You're not going to remember it anyway, so it's okay that we abused you like this. And that's the core of the issue, and it's a real thing. And fortunately, I was blessed with ways to prove my testimony. Many others are blessed with a great deal of proof around their testimonies. And so we can't be brushed aside so easily. And believe me, there's a lot of people out there that really have hammered me skeptically out of that seemed like they had an agenda. They went after it and ignored the truth. And I still get it. I'm sure it's not over yet. And it'd be weird if everybody wasn't skeptical.
Right.
When you're supposed to be done and they force you back. So it was about halfway through. Let me see if I have this. Does the share screen work?
It should.
I don't know if I have the slide here that depicts it. Here it is.
Yes.
So,
there should be a button on the bottom that says present and then share screen.
I don't know what I hit yes to. Can you see that?
Not yet.
So no.
There it is.
That. That's the timeline that it looks like. So I was taken in 82, woke up in Inyo Current in 82, April of 82 till December of 82. Then I was in Seattle, then to Peru for from January 83 to 85, then back to Seattle, and then from 85 to 87, and then the moon, then Mars, then Ceres, and then in around 89, taken out of Ceres and sold off to an ET species, and Project Star Maker happened. Those 10 years happened. Then I went back to 89, finished out that time to 2000, and then back to 1982. Maybe I should color code this and show that, but that's how I remember it. That's how I remember things. And then I lived to 2015, and all the memories came back. So that's kind of what it looks like. Whether that's
and it's it's interesting too, because in science fiction, they make time travel seem so easy. Like Star Trek, you take a ship around the sun at a certain speed and you can traverse time, and others, you go fast enough, you can traverse time. And so it seems like, science fiction has made it this so called easy topic that just eludes us. And then when we talk about actually experiencing it, everyone's like, no, that's impossible. And it's
science
like, wait
fiction
a
has
minute.
made it look comical. That's why science fiction made it look comical. All of it does. They make jokes about it so that you don't want to talk about it. They really added that factor onto ufology, and it worked. Gangbusters. But the ability to travel great distances in space also gives you the ability to travel great distances in time. Brett, that'd be awesome. I think you'd play me great. You would look better than me. I want to be one of the old guys in the story. Like I would do a guest cameo. He said screaming to direct and screenplay. That'd be awesome. It'd be a great show. I think Penny's Testimony would be a great movie as well. There's a lot of people that have come forward that put together a great show. I think that what I went through was actually low tech. Most of my existence up there and the ships I were on were not as advanced as many other ships that are, many other programs that are alive and well up there. For one. For two, I have a linear account, which is ironed out. So I was blessed in that regard. So it would make a good story. And there's a love story in there too. So there's a lot of, and it's a tragic love story, like an opera. So maybe it would be a good story. I think any story that depicted the experience of a 20 and back, a kid waking up the next day going, what happened? I've been gone, and feeling gone for that time would be huge. I think those are coming. It'll happen.
I think so too. And talking about, the tragic love story, I find myself asking a lot of people who are in the programs, and they are sharing their experiences and stories of, if you're on a 20 and back and you have a family, so to speak, to accomplish whatever task mission you are on, when you're pulled back, what happens to those people? Do they just cease to exist, or does the timeline continue on and they live out their life without you? And, that's something I thought about, and everyone gives me this strange look, kind of like you're giving me, and going, I've never thought about that.
No, I've thought about it. So hold on, let me play this from the beginning. You're taken, and you live the 20 years, and you're wondering if your family lives without you for the 20 years, and then it resets when you go back.
I'm meaning, so let's say doing 20 years on Taken, do 20 years on a ship, develop a romance, have a family on the ship, and then the time's up and I'm pulled back. What happens to everybody I was interacting with on the ship and had a family with?
So it's the same thing. So imagine it like this. You're living in Detroit, and I take you out of Detroit and put you in Chicago. From 1980 till 2000. And then at the end of your time in 2000, I age regress you and put you back to Detroit the day after you were taken. That family doesn't exist for another 20 years. And they're there. You could go find them. You could go at any minute and go find yourself. You coexist. There isn't a disappearance on one end or the other. I think that in my particular case, and in many cases, I think that they took me and cloned me. So it was a clone, and they took, by some exotic means of technology, a measure of my consciousness out of me and put it in the clone to drive it. So that both the clone and I, those 20 years, were lesser mentally, which, looking back on my life from 10 till 30 till 28, fits the bill. So, and then when it's over, your consciousness comes back to you after the end of 20 years via whatever means. And I kind of got my act together. And I find that kind of experience is in a lot of people that come to me with the same testimony. And so I think that's kind of how it works. I think it's a cloning. So the clone essentially dies. Your family in Chicago is there less their dad, or their, you know what I'm saying, less their
Right.
man, and they just keep going. So there's no magical other timeline that suddenly exists or doesn't exist. It's the timeline that we're in, and they're using your consciousness to inhabit other real estate in this timeline.
So I have an interesting experience, and I'm curious, talking about the fact they can clone people, and while they're doing everything, is my mom had hurt her shoulder, so I had to go to the store to pick up her clothes that she had ordered, and they knew me there because I had gone several times. And this particular day, I walk in there, and they all their jaws drop, and they're looking at me, and I go, "What's going on?" And they go, "Did you forget something?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" They go, "You were here just 10 minutes ago. You literally just walked out the door. So, did you forget something?" And I was like, "I literally just pulled up. I don't know what you're meaning." And so they were like, "Well, then we've seen your doppelganger." And
Could be.
I'm wondering, could the doppelgangers be our clones operating? And would they operate so close to where you are?
So definitely not. So these programs are not failures. So these are people that do their job extremely well. They would definitely not expose you, especially if it were in some kind of medial way, where you would walk into a store and just get a candy bar and walk out like that. I don't think that would be a policy that they would do. I think there are laws around it, and they follow rules. And these are people that do not make mistakes. We're used to government agencies being terrible. We're used to thinking that official, even the military, there's some incompetence. We are used to seeing government agencies and military things be incompetent. The secret space programs are not incompetent. When they get it done, and I don't think that something like that would happen from a program unless there was a very good reason.
Okay, so, but you do think the doppelganger effect could be clones but
I
the
don't
fact
know.
that we were close was an anomaly, but the fact that they exist could be.
My first wife was really terrible at telling people apart. She was always watching TV and she'd go, "That's that one guy. That's George Clooney." I said, "No, that's not. It's not even close." She just didn't have that ability. I'm not trying to brush aside what you said, what anybody said. I wasn't there, but I'm saying that a lot of people, it's a skill that some people don't have to recognize faces, and we do. I've had people tell me they saw me places, and they said, "Man, it was a guy just like you." I'm like, I wasn't even in that state at the time, and they go, "Man, it was a guy who looked just like you," and what can you do with it, right?
No, I appreciate that because I didn't think about, people not being able to discern, especially if it's a really fast,
In the chat,
view.
some people are like that. Like my first wife, did it all the time. We would watch TV. We'd watch these B class movies, these B grade movies with completely unknown actors. And she'd go, "Oh, that's that one guy. He's really famous." And I said, "No, that guy's not." And I always looked like a dip, but I was just being truthful. I'm just trying to say, look, I'm not going to lie about you so you feel better.
Yeah.
That is not a romantic quality that I have, but I try not to lie to make people feel better. I think the truth is respectful.
No,
But she
and
just didn't have that ability, not one bit.
right. And I think it's funny how we do that we'll see somebody go, "Hey, that's that guy." Like everybody's going to get that same clue that you got. They're just like, "Yeah." It's like and we sit there and we get frustrated when we're like, "How do you not know that guy?" And it's like, I
Yeah,
know a
that is
lot of guys.
not Brad
Which
Pitt. That is
guy?
not Brad Pitt, right? Um, so some other people said bilocation. There are things that happen. Let's face it. There's a lot of technology and things we don't know about. However, it has to justify it. So a lot of people yeah, I don't believe in timeline shifts like that either, to be honest with you. There's a lot of things that people that are real. There's a lot of things that are real, like bilocation and timeline shifts. However, these are things that are very, very rare and not happening for the general populace. So it's not happening everywhere. So every black helicopter is not the military stalking you because you posted something on Facebook. So there's a lot of people that want to associate things, and I'm not saying it's hard, it's difficult because that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. There are targeted individuals, there are people, there are black helicopters that follow people for certain reasons, but not every black copter is following you. And so, not every time you see somebody that looks like you, it's a biolocation from another dimension and a timeline. So, it seems like we're pulling a lot of things just to justify proving what we know is true,
Right, and
is that
it
we've
could
been lied
be.
to a lot of things.
And I've seen helicopters where it's black on one side, but the other side is black, but it has a mark on it, and you're like, yeah, if you're only seeing the one side, you're going to be like, oh, I got a black helicopter following me. Well, no, you just don't see the other side where it marks who it is.
I feel like I'm trying to be the voice of, I'm intend, it's my intention to be the voice of reason, but I feel like I'm being somebody that people might take as like trying to debunk everything. And I'm really not. I just am simply saying that not every cloud is a spaceship. And a lot of people just want, and it does us no good to assume that every cloud is a spaceship. It just clouds up the water for people that are giving real testimonies and real things that we could use to disclose with. So we could mount and pile up a case of these testimonies that have credible evidence, credible eyewitness accounts of technologies that exist that we could go together and do this. And then you've got a bunch of people saying that every cloud is a spaceship that sits there all day. And so it just kind of ruins the whole thing. And we have plants in the society, in our community, that do that on purpose. We have people that are telling people, you are a super soldier and you were in this war and you were in this program and you were this and this and this and you're the commander of all these people. I saw it in my remote view. Here's my pictures from the AI thing. So these have come out by the hundreds, and what it's done is it weighs down the movement. And it's worked gangbusters. It's the same thing they did with ufology. We've had credible pictures, credible witnesses, and credible evidence of ufology for where are we at 25 75 years, better than 80 years. 80 years we've had pictures of UFOs. We've had people telling us correct things about anti-grav, about the ETs, all of it, and it's been swallowed up. It's been the needle has been buried in a pile of needles of testimonies that they generated that were BS. And so it works really good.
No, and I appreciate how you do it because being a paranormal investigator, I would do everything like I thought I was supposed to. But, I was like, is this, really evidence? I don't really know. I can't explain what this is. And so one day I reached out to another paranormal investigator and I said, I was able to duplicate one aspect, but not the whole experience. You know, and so what do you make of this? And his response actually was the fact that you tried to prove everything makes you a true paranormal investigator. And so I kind of felt validated in that moment of, wow, this person who's been in the field for a long time sees this. But yeah, it's like I agree with you, is if you can disprove it, don't claim it. You gotta, and if you can duplicate it, chances are it's not something to go and hang your hat on. And
I
different
I
field.
I say it all the time that there's no way I would sit here and talk in public about people if I didn't have something that was unexplainable to back me up. I would not have done. I would not go in front of a crowd of people and tell this story that's painful for most people to listen to if I didn't have evidence. And that's just where we're at in the world today. They're going to give us a disclosure. I mean, we're about to have we're going to have a really nutty year or two in front of us. And there's going to be some disclosures. We're going to get some things. They're talking about going to Mars. They're going to be some surprises along the way. So we are going to get a disclosure, but my testimony, Penny's testimony, other testimonies are going to be inconvenient for them. So they're going to have to debunk us or attack us in some way or admit it, which I think is the high ground. Just admit it that, in the history, people were abused by certain ET groups. That's it. And move on. We move on. But until then, they are clouding up the water. Definitely.
Right. And Iron Bear is asking, I don't know if you've ever seen the Netflix movie Rebel Moon. He's wanting to know if your memories are close to that movie.
I don't think I've seen it, to be honest with you. I haven't watched it. So I wouldn't know. And I would ask if somebody like Brett, who read my books, might have seen that show and he could lend a hand. But I haven't seen that. I went on a personal note, I went for a couple years without Netflix. I lost Netflix in the divorce, put it that way.
Well, I don't have Netflix myself, so I can't help you out with the show. When I heard a certain group took over and the programming started going more in a weird direction, I was like, nope, I'm done. I'm out.
I'm curious to watch it too, Brent. Yeah. Yeah, 1890s, I think even beyond that. The Nuremberg wood sculpture carving is from 1575 or 1579. And that was a space battle over the town of Nuremberg with spaceships that showed up and began fighting each other. And there were thousands of witnesses.
Yeah. Oh, Penny says it's very different from her memories. So I'm not sure. We'll have to find a way to watch it. But, it's interesting. We're at the hour mark. Do you have time to go a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine to talk. This is enjoyable.
We're talking about like UFOs and, how they've always been around. And I find it interesting when we go and look at like Middle Age art and Renaissance art, and you see clearly a disc beaming light into a room on certain paintings and going, how in the world have we, for a century almost, looked at this painting and no one's ever said, hey, look, there's a UFO?
Yeah. It was just accepted. It wasn't a UFO until the 40s. Everybody believed in UFOs. My mom had the benefit. My mom was born in, I think, I don't want to say, it's rude to speak of a lady's age, but she was young when it was not unacceptable to say that you were a UFO witness. She read the newspapers the flyover of the Capitol with discs. There were credible people. It was real. It was in the newspaper. They covered it. Once upon a time, we actually had real media in the United States at once.
Right.
And there was a time before they covered it up, before they went back and began the cover up. And I don't know. I forget where I was going with that, other than it was real. And my mom used to tell me about it when I was a kid. Like, look, they're real. ETs, people see them all the time. And we used to have discs. They were in the newspaper all the time. Then all of a sudden, in one day in the 50s, it all disappeared. And then they started making fun of it and making it where if you saw a UFO, you were crazy or a nut and to make fun of you. And there was a real time for that too. So we are just generations down the road from that, and it looks like it's always been like that. But there was a time when there was real coverage.
Right, and not only did they try to make it a mockery, but then they came out with like War of the Worlds, and we're like, now we want you to be afraid of these discs that were just hanging out, so to speak, and not really doing anything. Now it's, oh, they're coming to invade. They're scouting us to invade us. And
The whole fear programming is very, very effective and very real. It changes your psyche and makes people subconsciously shoot themselves in the foot and indecisive, and it works. So there was also a time when fear wasn't prevalent in media, but now it is.
yeah, and I kind of lost faith in the media, like news systems during the Persian Gulf Wars, because I had the fortune of seeing a bunch of troops about to go to Iraq at an airport, and they all were smiling, laughing, cutting up, and in my mind I'm going, you guys are going to hell on earth. How are you in such a good mood? And I finally got the courage up and went over to them and said, thank you for what you do. And they said, well, thank you. And I said, I don't know how you guys are smiling knowing what you're going over to. And they looked at me and sat me down and said, look, I'll be honest with you. The news media, I don't know what they're talking about. We get one IED a month, if that. We spend more time at schools. We spend more time helping the people there. And so, yeah, we don't understand what the media is talking about. And so, in that moment, it clicked in me, I got to stop watching the news because it's not true. Because these soldiers had no reason to lie.
Even the local news, if you've ever watched a car accident and then saw it reported in the news or a robbery, they get all the details wrong. It's almost on purpose. Like even local things that are insignificant, they give all the wrong details. It's wrong across the board. I kind of want to mention some stuff that I'm working on these days.
Yeah. So what projects are you working on?
So I started a website called scion.com, and I am working on a learning company based on the experience that I had on Mars when they trained me. So when they put me through school in the secret space program, I remember kind of how it worked. And I've been building a software company to use that model of learning. It's called Maple Street Learning. It's adaptive media. So it provides you with media. And as you sift through it, as you go through the lesson, the media that you're better at, you respond better at, it feeds you more of. So some people would rather read, some people would rather watch a movie, some people would rather just see a picture and a small audio, etc. I started researching and buying software to build the audio portions of it, and I remember that early on when I was going to the school, that the first few minutes I used to have to listen to a binaural. The sound of a binaural, and I remembered it. I also listened to binaurals in the 20 and back in Inyokern. And so it always stayed in my memory. And I started researching binaurals to put into the software, to incorporate into the software for Maple Street Learning. And what happened was, working in conjunction with a guy named Dan Winter and Dan Willis, friends of mine, I learned a lot about the science of the harmonics and how they work in terms of the brain waves that enable psychic abilities. And so I've made a bunch of binaural products that have binaurals, bilaterals, and isotronic sounds. So it works whether or not you have headphones on. I put white noise or brown noise, music, and subliminals. So people have, a friend of mine he's passed away now. God bless him, a guy named Gary Hampton. I loved him. He worked in sound. He did 30 years of sound. He was the sound man he made commercials. He did for I think the Dallas baseball team. Was it the Rangers? I forget.
Yes,
Texas Rangers. The Texas Rangers. He was the sound guy for them for like a decade. And he told me how subliminals work and how to do them, and gave me sound information. He gave me some sound advice. So I baked all these things into products, and I thought I'm going to make a motivational one so I can motivate myself and get some of this stuff done. And I made a binaural. I used AI to get the right brain waves, and then the Dan Winters cascade and some other sequences in there to get the right carrier wave and the right binaural and bilaterals. And they're amazing. And so I started a website called scion.com, and they're selling. People love them. They're a little pricey, like some of them are $30, $40, $50. They're like a half hour. And I'm coming up with a whole slew of them. No, it's PSIION, so 2 I's. PSIION. And that's my website. I'm also going to have Obelisk. That's it. So then researching for my book Beyond Sight about psychoenergetic monuments, I found that obelisks were all arranged. Can I do a let me see if I can find it first. Oh man. I'm trying to find these, and yes, if I can do a screen share again.
Yes, you
Let me do that.
Go through.
Yeah, I'll do it again. I want to show you guys these slides because this was something I discovered in my book. I was looking into the science and the history of remote viewing, and I came across psychoenergetic monuments. Present, share screen, entire screen. There
we go.
So this is the Hamdel Labs. Here's Astana, Kazakhstan. So we have a quartz monument here, 0.72 miles from the water, with a pyramid right around the third mark. And then right here we have this bidirect tower. It's at 0.72 miles to this area, the presidential palace, and to a water fountain on this end. Okay, big deal. Hamdel, New Jersey. This grounds was designed by the guy that made the St. Louis Arch, the same architect. Inside this tower, there's a quartz statue down here, and it's 0.72 miles to a water fountain right through the Bell Labs. And then you got this at the same distance, about a third of the way. Florence, Italy has the Boboli Gardens, well renowned for their water quality and their award-winning wine. Marcel Vogel did a Vogel experiment by charging water with a quartz crystal with a 60-degree terminus, the same as this obelisk that was taken from ancient Karnak. The same array with the Pitti Palace as the Karnak Temple. Here's the obelisk and a downhill array, 0.72 miles to where the water aerates on a waterfall right here into the river. Paris, France, the Eiffel Tower, it's the same thing. Distance from the military academy here, 0.72 miles. Luxor, Egypt, here's the original one. There's an array. These are quartz sandstone. There were 2 obelisks here. There were many here. There's also a 0.72 mile distance from a pond up here to the sacred pond. It's the same thing to the Nile, 0.72 miles. Another one in Paris, France, for the other obelisk that was taken from Karnak. And there's also another array up here from a mausoleum or something. Same thing. St. Louis, Missouri, 0.72 miles. There's also a pyramid structure 0.72 miles in, going to the Mississippi River. And then here's the Vatican to the Tiber River. Again, a obelisk taken from Karnak, 0.72 miles from the Basilica, right here, about a third of the same distance into the way, with an array of quartz statues that create an array. and then 0.72 miles to where the water aerates the same way as in Florence by the Tiber River. Washington, D.C., it's another obelisk, 0.72 miles through the reflecting pool. The construction of it was held up for decades, so they got the right amount of quartz into the material. I think that's it. So
I'm curious, have you ever been to the Bicentennial Mall in Nashville?
No. Is it the same thing?
I don't know if it's 0.72 miles, but it's a base, and it stands in front of like their Capitol building and everything. But as you walk up, it's kind of layered, and there's like a dividing line. And when you reach the end, there's the symbols of the three stars of Tennessee, and the layout of it. My friend William Henry says it lines up with the chakras. And so it's like you're going through an energetic shift. And what caught my attention as you're talking about these obelisks is it has an obsidian ball that's like the globe etched in it, and it's on water. So you can go up and spin it freestyle. And it's like a really cool experience, and it's a very energetic spot, but I'm wondering if it lines up with.
Oh yeah, wow, that's an array there. Let's see. Let me measure it. I'm looking at it on Google Earth. No, it's very short. It's only 0.3 of a mile, and there isn't a main. Usually, there's a main obelisk or a pillar that's made out of quartz that has a quartz content. So, I want to get on to what I did with this is I looked at the content of these obelisks that were because they were all taken from the same quarry in Egypt, the Aswan quarry. So it was the red granite and had a high quartz content, the same like the Vogel crystal. It also had a content of a bunch of other materials. And I built one. I used epoxy and I used crushed quartz and other materials that are just like the Egyptian obelisk, and hooked it up to a piezo pickup under the advice of Dan Winter with the harmonics of the binaurals and the bilaterals that I created. And we are getting tremendous results. I'm building an array. I built one today, and I'm waiting on parts to come in the mail. I'm going to be offering these obelisks for sale with the harmonics that help. We use them while we remote view. They seem to help. They seem to be better at remote viewing. There's a healing harmonic in the 50 range that Dan Winter says that his firecrystal.com, which is an existing product, and Dan Willis has his crystal. It's a frill generating device, which is open source. But Dan says that harmonic can cause cellular negentropy or healing. And so I ran that through my obelisk, and I slept by it for a few nights, and I'll be damned if things that have been bothering me for a long time went away. So I will be putting this out as I continue forward with these products. With this research. We're hoping to offer products because it's made out of epoxy. It's a little pricey to build them, but it's not too bad. And with the right harmonics, you can listen to the binaural, and essentially it's creating a piezo static electricity in the same exact harmonic range. So when you're listening to a binaural, let's say you're listening to one of a theta, so that you can meditate or do a remote viewing or clairvoyant, whatever session you want to do, you're listening to the binaural. You can also broadcast it in via static electricity of piezo directly into your body, and it increases the effect of it. And that's the research I've done so far, and I'm very happy with how far it's come. And I'll be putting out, and it's going to be offered. So Scion, that website's only like a week old. I've been selling those binaurals on my Patreon for a month now, and making them. There's only like 3 or 4 on there. We've got 14 of them drawn up. They're in pieces that I'll assemble over the coming months and add them on that website. But the obelisks are also going to get added on there with the electronics that can broadcast. And I'm waiting until I get an array built and a proper one wired up. And I use a trimeter. The results are measurable with a trimeter. You can literally see the electricity and the distance of it, and set another obelisk next to it and it broadcasts it, and you can see that as well. So I'll be making videos, and those will all be on that website, and I'll start putting them on social media as well when they happen.
Okay, and Kits Lahell is asking, do you think they've already trademarked Mind Control Yourself Thin that would sell well?
So exactly, there is a weight loss one. I'm going to make a weight loss one and a quit smoking. I have a motivational one, a health one, a successful mindset, and a protection one that I just finished. And these are, look, they use this technology against us. If you think that the Super Bowl commercials are just selling you the product, think again. So there is subliminal high-tech programming. Every time you see ICE in television, they say it's a subliminal message in there. They're programming you to not only buy products when they say, but to believe things that they say. This is why people giggle at UFO. They've been subliminally programmed through many forms of media. Your subconscious mind giggles at it. So it's hard to have that's why they didn't change the definition of UFO. They just rebranded it UAP because they already spent billions of dollars programming you to demonize the thought of a UFO. And so that's what they do. So why not use the technology, the same a crude version of the same technology to make yourself better, to solve some of your personal problems? And that's what I'm trying to do. I think it's a banging idea for a company and for a website to make some money on the side, and I'm going for it. So, and I'm working on my next book, which is going to be a compilation of people that I've worked with and testimonies that I've worked with in the past to tell kind of a tell-all, let people know what I've learned from people that have come to me and shared their story with me. So I want to compile all that info together, and I'm working on that. That'll be my fourth book.
Wow, you are just hitting the pavement.
Can't sit still, man. And I've been fortunate with my remote viewing courses and with the books to make enough money to do this full time. Not that I'm wealthy by any means, but it pays the bills. My Patreon, I'm in there 5-6 meetings a week teaching people. I've got 4 remote viewing groups with 10 to 12 people in each group, and we teach them from beginning to advanced. I'm working on a fifth group, which is advanced remote viewing and monitored sessions. I was the first one to disclose remote viewing blocking techniques and countermeasures. We work on those and advanced remote viewing techniques. So there's enough there to go around, and then that with the books that I've let out already, which is not a ton of money, but it's a little trickle of money with the Patreon. It's keeping me alive. And it's given me time to research and do these things and work on the next book and the next, and then last year I was on the road quite a bit. I'm not going to do it this much this year, but I've got some pretty big shows, talking engagements this year lined up. Very proud of that. I'm very fortunate to have been invited to. And, today people want to hear my story. Tomorrow I'll be chopped liver. It'll be somebody else. And that's the way it is. And so I'm very fortunate and honored to be here on your show and to be invited. And for anybody like Brett who read my book, it's a great honor. A lot of people have just everybody's got a book in them. I think everybody's got a book in them, and not everybody gets to tell it. So I'm very honored to be here.
Well, and thank you for that. And Gaia Love One, she has an interesting question or comment is, I've been putting binaural music for my pet, and it got me thinking, we look at healing ourselves, but what about I like to call them fur babies or birds or any pets that we have? Does it affect them, and do they have positive results as well, or?
I don't know. I haven't read any studies of it. I don't see why not. They do have hemispheres, but I don't think. I think their brain physiology is different, and I'm not sure exactly how it works. I don't see why not. It should have some form of an effect, a bilateral especially, so where you don't need to put headphones on them. A binaural that you're playing through a speaker will do nothing. So it needs to be a bilateral sound if you're playing it through a speaker. Otherwise, a binaural, it has to have headphones. It has to be in each individual ear. So if you want to play a binaural for your pet, you may look for a bilateral sound. That would have better results. And give your pet and see. I'll bet it would calm them down. So when you hit the right frequency in making these, it sounds okay. You're like, it sounds okay. And you come down the frequency and you go down the scale. There are harmonics that are just right, that are tuned to charge collapse to the Planck distance, as Dan Winter would say. And when you hit those harmonics, you go, and it's soothing and it feels really good. And so that I don't see why that wouldn't help an animal or a plant for that matter. I think that plant life is just as conscious as any other life. It experiences time in a different way, so we don't notice it. We think they're not doing anything, when really they just age very, very, very slowly.
Right, look at a tree. I mean, it takes hundreds of years to get tall where we get tall. And, it always amazes me when we look at babies to what we become, and we know our bones are growing and being stretched, but we never feel it. And I find that kind of interesting because when you hear of like something being stretched, it's like you're like, ow. But yet we've been stretched and
Well,
we
very
never said
slowly.
ow.
Yeah. So you get growing pains here and there, but yeah, it happens in a slow process. You don't watch it. You don't notice somebody growing up unless you're away from them for a long time, and then you come back. You go, "Whoa, you've grown." But if you're living with them, you don't really watch it happens. It happens very slowly. Plants are the same way. Plants live their day-to-day life in 3 days or 4 days for them. So they're conscious. Plants, there are experiments. They know who's picking them. They don't enjoy having their roots pulled out. They don't enjoy being consumed. It's life. Life is the same.
I agree. And I have a question for you, and I don't know that you've ever may not have put it together or looked at it in this way, but a lot of people now are starting to talk about like quantum healing and like med beds, quantum AI healing the body. And you mentioned how your device using the bilateral can do that. So is your device working on the quantum level, or is that disinformation that we're all being told that
So
we don't look at?
when you talk about quantum level, that's another term like remote viewing, I think, that's being misinterpreted. Yes. So the harmonic works when we talk about charge collapse or a sound wave or a harmonic or a light wave for that matter. When you think about it, standing in a field and yelling, hello, that sound goes out and dissipates and becomes smaller and smaller. That wave becomes smaller and smaller. Okay. So charge does the same thing. In fact, you are sitting on a chair that's made of charged particles. So molecules are grouped together of electrons and protons and neurons, and those are grouped together from protons. And protons are nothing more than perturbations of charge of the ether or the unified field. So everything is made out of merely charge, all of it. It's just an electrical charge. And it's held together by the electromagnetic waves that the charge creates. So electromagnetism, and it creates a fractal. So that sound wave that you make, if you go, I hate you, that sound wave will dissipate and not follow the fractal down. It's out of tune. And if you go, I love you, and I'm using these as hypothetical examples, if it's in tune with the fractal of the universe, it will go all the way down, like spiral down by increments of the golden mean, golden ratio, and arrive exactly at the Planck distance. And if it does that, it goes outside of time space and accesses what some people call the universal mind, the Akashic record, outside of time space, the absolute infinity, many different names for it. But you can communicate, and that's how remote viewing works. There's only 2 brainwave states that we know. The math does this. The math does brainwaves do charge collapse by the golden mean all the way down to the Planck, and those are the ones that yield the most information in remote viewing, and that is bliss or peace, neutral. Dr.
Sorry.
Penny, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about Dr. Fried. I mean, I'm unfamiliar with those people. Yeah, my book, Beyond Sight. And then you can have a look at Dan Winter's page and then Dan Willis's page. Dan Willis has a page. Dan Willis is plankfire.com. PLANCKPHIRE.com. And that'll get you started down the rabbit hole of charge collapse. So,
I think I spelled it right.
yes, you did.
I'm learning.
But anyhow, that charge collapse works. It holds up. There are people in aerospace that use the same math. There's a lot of sciences that work with this, and remote viewing is one of them. So these nodal points come into play, the charge collapse and the brain waves come into play. Light waves do the same thing, sound waves do the same. And so those are the harmonics that I'm using on the obelisks and in my binaurals. I'm using only the harmonics that can go down to the plank as they collapse. And so there's a very soothing sound to it. And the time that I've played the harmonic through the obelisk, I've had major physical problems go away. So, I'm just one guy. It's not clinically tested. I'm not trying to offer medical misadvice or anything like that, but I'm telling you that there is an effect. And so I'm measuring it. I'm trying to get the science together. And when I'm ready, I will offer them for sale through scion.com.
Very cool. And last question, because I know we're getting close to the cutoff time already. Wow. I'm just curious, your personal opinion. Do you feel like the fact that with the leadership we have now, the Space Force is going to block Project Bluebeam from happening or lessen it? Or do you think it's just going to allow it and let people, quote, see the movie and decide their own?
Tell you the truth, I have no insight on what their plans are going to be. We can only look at what's happened on the surface, and it seems there's been a struggle for America, and recently America has regained top position. So as far as what they're going to do, a fake alien invasion or Project Bluebeam or some other thing, I really don't know. It's my hunch that they're going to explore the moon and go to Mars, and on one of those trips, they're going to find something that proves life is out there, intelligent life is out there, and then all of a sudden, intelligent life will say, "Oh, you found us, you proved it, you finally made it. Now you can join us." And they'll start with their fresh pack of lies, and everybody will become an expert overnight, and that'll be the beginning of mankind growing up and being part of the galactic community. And so it's a good thing, no matter how it works out.
Well, good. And so thank you for your time and thank you for coming back. And hopefully, we'll get you back again on another episode.
I'd love to, Michael, anytime.
All right. And for everyone that's been in the chat room, thank you for watching and participating. And I can't begin to thank Tony and everyone that shares the stage with him and comes forward and shares their experiences. Much love to you guys and much support to you guys, and keep doing what you're doing. Don't let yourself get discouraged, because we're back. We're behind you.
I just want to say to Brent and Penny and you guys in the chat, thanks for coming out and with the great questions. Great to see you guys. And ditto what you said, Michael. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. And with that, we are going to say good night. So have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode.